All right. Well, thanks for tuning into another episode of the Why Influence podcast. Today, we have an awesome guest. His name is Dr. Hardy, Dr. Benjamin Hardy. He's an author. He's a big contributor on medium.com. He's built an amazing email list. He's just helping people in a large way and helping people overcome a lot of their barriers. So it's very aligned to this podcast. So I'm just excited that we have Ben here with us today. So I appreciate you coming on with us.
Yeah, Jeremy, it's gonna be fun. Be a fun conversation.
Awesome. Well, real quick, can you just give like a 2 or 3 sentence elevator pitch about what your platform and brand is all about?
Yeah, it's pretty much about, I would say, helping people. I mean, kind of honestly, very similar to yours, helping people break past obstacles, understand how they can make change in their life, providing science to show how that's done.
Nice. Yeah, I've read some of your articles on Medium, and it seems very aligned with a lot of stuff that I talk about here. So do you mind sharing like an unintended consequence that you've recently received, somebody that you've impacted in some way that you didn't expect, that's sort of reached out to you and told you that? Is there a story that comes to mind?
Yeah. So in a recent email that I sent out, and this was about COVID-19, I had two questions, and these are two questions that I had been developing and thinking about, like just having conversations. But I then sent the questions out to my email list and got a lot of interesting responses that were very helpful. Like people, a few people really kind of need to hear these questions. One of the questions was basically thinking back on who you were before COVID-19. Like what are the decisions or what are the things that you're glad you were doing before the situation occurred that you couldn't, that you're very glad you were doing now that this situation has happened. So that was just one, as far as just like thinking about something you're grateful for, essentially, that you were doing before, and you could have never anticipated that something like this would happen, but you're glad you were doing it, or you're glad you did it. The second question was about your future self, and basically like, how is your future self, which is just kind of the vision you have for yourself, how is your future self helping you get beyond COVID-19? And it was really interesting just to see a lot of people say that these questions helped them to feel a lot better about the situation. So I just thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, those are great questions. That was actually stuff that I've recently reflected on myself. So, very good questions. So, did you hear back from someone? Did someone?
Yeah. There was, trying to think of someone specific, but I would have to like honestly like look at my phone, and I don't have that
Okay.
on me. But I remember people. I mean, especially the gratitude one, where it's like I remember people saying they hadn't thought about it that way, and that they'd kind of been just caught up, and so. I just remember getting a handful of responses. One stuck out just as far as like that they were quite depressed, and then they realized that they were pretty proud of themselves, honestly, for all the things that they were doing, that they were kind of under acknowledging, just kind of being proud of them. And I just remember someone saying that they were proud of who they were before because of some of the decisions they had made.
Yeah, that's great. So you took someone just through your questions and your emails from someone who maybe was a little bit depressed to being in a proud state. That's pretty amazing.
Yeah, it's cool. I mean, it's very surprising, honestly. Like, I actually don't really read my own emails anymore because I just try to stay focused. And um, every once in a while, I'll have like a team member on mine send me positive emails, just to remind me, because it can be really easy to forget what the heck's going on.
Mm.
And sometimes you just don't want to deal with the negatives because when you're writing about semi-controversial things, you can get some negative feedback, but obviously it's far more positive than negative. But I always tell them to please send me things every once in a while just so that I can remember that this stuff really matters. And, so I try to at least read one or two a week, just, and I'm in touch with my audience and stuff, but as far as just general emails.
Yeah, that's a good reminder. I mean, when
Makes
you've
it
got
makes a big difference because sometimes you can forget why it matters, and it really freaking matters. And you're always surprised, by the way. Like I'm always surprised that anything I say matters. I mean, even to this day, like I'll throw out thoughts and just ideas, and whether they go viral or not, I'm always just like, I can't believe that this actually matters to people, but it really does.
yeah, that's amazing, and it's just interesting to think that you've got some team members who are like sort of that filter barrier for you to see the impact that you're having, and they've got to intentionally forward it your way. So it's a little bit more of a barrier to seeing the impact that you're having in some aspects. And it's just interesting to see that it's still very important to have that as the reminder because this is why you're doing it, right?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes you forget. Like sometimes when you're like in the cave, for example, I was in the cave for 2 years. The last 2 years, I was finishing my PhD, and then I wrote 2 books in the last 2 years. And so I haven't really been blogging as much lately, and I haven't been out and about, like, just even talking to people like you. So this is kind of fresh, and it's really fun. But you do forget when you're like in the creation cave. And you can kind of be down, honestly, with your ideas and just, not sure, because it's nice actually when you're blogging or when you're communicating, because you're actually getting feedback. But when you're like in a cave for a few years and you're not getting feedback, you can really forget that there's other people on the other side of this and that they're going to read it, and it is for them, and you're obviously writing it with the audience in mind. But it's really important to get feedback and to stay in touch with people.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. Well, I'm happy you're back.
I'm happy I'm back, man. I'm happy I'm talking to you. It's good to speak to humans.
All right. So you've gained quite a bit of success. You've got I looked at your Medium earlier. It's 238,000 followers on Medium, and you've used that to create an email list. And you're also so active on Facebook and Instagram and everything as well. But where did your sharing journey start? When did you start like just intentionally sharing your thoughts in some way that's bigger than just like one-on-one conversations or just like your close community?
In 2015, that's when I started blogging online. I'd actually wanted to write for probably 4 or 5 years before that. I was always afraid that my thoughts would be wrong, like, because I write on self-improvement and psychology and even a blend of spirituality. And so I was worried that the things that I would put out would like push people the wrong way or ruin people's lives or be misinformation. And so it led me to not writing for years, just because. And what's funny now, there's a quote that I really love. And the quote is that a painting is never finished. It simply ends in interesting places. So like a painting is never finished. Like I wrote a book called Willpower Doesn't Work. And I recently read that book. So I wrote that 3 years ago, and I recently reread it. And it's interesting because I would not have written that book today. Like I'm not the same person who wrote that book today. I sometimes go back and read old blog posts, and I'm like, wow, I would not say that today. But I don't even care anymore, because none of them were ever finished products. Like no painting is ever finished. It just ends in some interesting place. I mean, even Personality Isn't Permanent, the book I just wrote, in a couple of years from now, I'm going to relook at it and be like, wow, I wouldn't say that today. But I think that's okay now. I'm fine with that now. That's part of the creative process. Whereas in the past, I was too worried about writing things that I thought would be right. And I think that's the wrong way to go about it. And so instead, a quote that kind of came to my mind that finally just got me to do it was, I just like the idea of being anxiously engaged in a good cause, just trying to do good things, trying to help people where you can. And wherever I was in 2015 and 16 and 17 writing blog posts, like I'm really glad I did it, because it helped people in that situation, even though I now see things a little different. If I hadn't have done all that, I wouldn't have been where I'm at now, but I also wouldn't have helped people. And so it's okay that none of that work was perfect, and none of the work I'll ever do will be perfect. And so you just can kind of let that go.
I love that. I mean, that relieves a lot of pressure, because then it's not like you don't have to be perfect. You can evolve over time, and you can look back and be
you
like,
don't have
it's
to be
okay
right.
then.
Like you can just be doing your best and like just share what your thoughts are in the moment. And it's okay if those thoughts change next week, but like you share what you're feeling or what you think would be helpful.
Yeah, that's great advice. So you said that it took 5 years to start blogging. You've been thinking about it for a long time before you actually started. So what was going through your head at those times? Like what was stopping you for those 5 years? Or why didn't you start earlier? If you don't mind.
Yeah, I was. Yeah, I would love to share. I was not actually thinking I wanted to be a blogger. That was never actually my goal. I definitely wanted to write books. I went on a church mission when I was 20 years old, and that just totally blew my mind. I read lots of books, psychology, obviously religion, spirituality, self-improvement. Read a ton of books, did a lot of journaling, and just that experience led me to wanting to become a writer. I wasn't sure. So I think for the 5 years, I was going to college, but I was doing a lot of procrastinating. I was reading a lot of books, and I was imagining that one day I would be a writer, but I never actually figured out the direction I would go. Like for a while, I was thinking, do I want to write? Do I want to be a professor and write like articles? Do I want to write like religious books? Do I want to write business books? Like for a long time, I was just going back and forth in my head about the direction I wanted to go with my career. And it took a long time to clarify and just decide a direction. And I think if I could go back, I would have started a lot sooner, 100%. Like I would have started back right in 2010, like when I wanted to do it, I would have started right then and there, and there'd probably 4 or 5 books that would be written. I might be in a totally different direction now, but I would have definitely started sooner. I was overly thinking, but yeah, so I was just not clear on the direction. I didn't make a decision. And then ultimately the thing that allowed me to finally make the decision was that I got serious about the process. And I'm not talking about sitting down and writing, because I don't think that you just do that. You have to have a goal, to have a process. What I meant was I got to studying what it actually takes to become a professional writer. Like rather than just reading books and being inspired, I actually started to figure out, how do you actually write books? Like, how do you get a book deal? Like, how do you even become a writer? Like I actually started to study the how of doing it in about 2014. And that's when I started to get more serious.
Okay. Yeah. So then that happened pretty quick. When in 2014 you started studying the how, and then within a year you're blogging.
I think that that's a good sign. I think it's a good sign if you're ready to start doing something, that you start studying how to do it. Like you start reading people and how to become an author or how to become a writer, or I think once you start studying the how, you're on a good path.
I like that a lot. So what why did you want to start blogging? You spent these 4 years sort of like figuring out why, and then you're like, okay, let's figure out how, and then you chose a path and pursued it. So why did you, like, in those earlier blog posts, like what was your what was your why behind that? Or like why did you start?
Well, the first thing I did is I definitely clarified who I wanted to be. So I think that that's an essential thing that you do even before you start anything, is you define your future self. For me, my future self was someone, so this was in 2015 at this point, but my future self was someone who was a professional author, writing for one of the big traditional publishers, having conversations with people like you, and just sharing really interesting, cool ideas. But I wanted to do it in a way that I could provide for my family, because at that time we just barely gotten 3 foster kids. I was beginning of my PhD program. So I started with my future identity, but then I need to figure out how to actually make that a reality. So it's like, well, how do you actually get a 6-figure book contract, or how do you write? And so I then had to ask a lot of advice, honestly, before I ever started blogging, because blogging was not my goal, and I actually had an aversion to it. I didn't really want to do it. I just wanted to start writing books. But now I actually love writing blog posts. To me, it's totally a different vibe than writing books. It's a lot easier and a lot lighter, and you can fail a lot faster, and it doesn't matter if you suck at it. It's purely experimental. Whereas books, it feels like it's a lot more, you've got to do it right, even though that's not true either. But anyways, I ended up asking a lot of advice, like, how do you get book deals? How do you make this happen? Asked agents, asked lots of authors, and ultimately I got similar advice that you need an email list. If you want to get a 6-figure book deal, you need at least 100,000 emails. Like I was just starting to get all this information. And so I was like, wow. And so everyone was like, you're going to have to build an email list. And you do that through blogging if you're going to be an author. And so I was like, okay, that was kind of like the cold hard truth. It's like, okay, if I really want to do this, then I must actually do this. I must build an audience. And so then I started investing. I bought an online course from John Morrow, who's got like a blogging platform, and he teaches people how to write. I mean, he's got an amazing online course that taught me how to write headlines, which really helped me, and taught me how to structure my articles and how to pitch them onto big platforms. And so that's when I started blogging, was when I just faced the hard truth that in order to achieve my goal, I had to do it. And then I just figured, because I was so committed to the goal, I was going to do it well. And so I learned how to do it in a way that would be successful. And I think that's why I was able to grow so fast, is because I was like very serious about the goal, very serious about my future self. And then my process transformed a lot, because I was like, I'm going to get good at this.
Yeah, that's a great approach. So do you mind if we go a little bit deeper into the process of like how you defined your future self, and a little bit about that?
All that stuff. Whatever you want to talk about, I'm here with you, brother. I'm just happy to be with you. So we can talk about whatever you want.
Sure. All right. Well, then, why don't you tell us a little bit about the process you used for defining your future self, and then maybe after that we can, you can tell us a little bit about the future self that you identified as the target that you can aim for.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, I think that I'll explain a little bit of the psychology behind it. So it's important to realize that as a person, you're not the same person as you were in the past. So like, you're not the same person as you were 5 years ago. Even though like there may be aspects of you that are the same, you're not actually the same person. You see the world a little differently. You make decisions differently. You have different goals, maybe different friends, different priorities, different preferences. And so so your former self is different than your current self, but also your future self should be viewed as someone who's different than you are today. They're in a different situation. They've got, different abilities, different goals, different relationships. And so it's good to just think, who do you ultimately want to be? Like there's a lot of research on this, but basically the number one regret that people have on their deathbed is that they didn't have the courage to do what they wanted to do or be who they wanted to be. Instead, they lived up to the expectations of those around them. So I think this is why I think you need to be honest. One of my favorite quotes is that all progress starts by telling the truth. This could be in like a blogging fashion as far as just writing things, but I think it's also about telling people what you want. And even first off, telling yourself what you want. And so for me, that process has always happened in my journal. I journal all the time, and I journal every single day. I journaled probably 3 or 4 pages today, maybe 10 minutes, but just writing down, what you want. There's a really good book that influenced a lot of my thinking a long time ago. It's called As a Man Thinketh. And it's really just about how your thoughts shape your character, your thoughts shape your circumstances, your thoughts shape the money you make. And so for me, journaling is about just training my thoughts. I mean, one of the things about future self is that it's not something you discover, it's something you decide. There's no right or wrong answer. You just decide, who's the person I want to be. It could be author, it could be musician. It's just being honest about who you want to be and just choosing a future self. And you can always re-choose. But just making a choice rather than spending so much time trying to figure it out. It's just saying, this is what I would want. And then you can train your thoughts, and you can train your mind, and you can train your identity, honestly, that way. So for me, it's just journaling, but I think that you could and should be specific so I was very specific. I was like, I want to get a 6-figure book contract with one of the major 5 publishers in New York, and so like that was very specific. I want to be writing. And then you write about your circumstances. I want to have a flexible and fluid schedule. I don't want to have to go to a 9-to-5 job. I want to work from home, or I want to be writing about these topics, and I want to be having these, so it's just kind of framing out who you want to be and what you want your life to look like, how much money you want to be making, or how you want to be spending your time, or the type of person you want to be.
Back in 2015, like you actually like had all that defined, and you had this like clear vision of like
pretty much. But it was process every single day. But yeah, by 2015, I'd wanted to be a writer before that, but I got more and more creative or more clarifying. And by 2015, I was like, I want to be a professional writer. I want to be a published writer. I want to be making at least 6 figures writing so that I can provide for a family of, at that point, only 3 kids. Now I've got 5. But I also just wanted the time and the flexibility just to work when I wanted, to leave when I wanted, to be around people that inspired me. And so I was just very much clarifying all these things. And I really think that we choose it. You have to define this stuff for yourself, and you get to choose it. And also then you can train yourself to want it even more and more. You can train yourself to become committed to it and to let go of your former identity and to really commit to your future self as who you are today.
Yeah, that's huge. I really liked what you said about the future self isn't something you discover, it's something you decide, and you just have to make the choice. That was powerful.
You got to do it. There's no right or wrong answer. It's just making a choice. It's like, do you want to be an author? Do you want to be like an aerospace engineer? Like, just make a choice, but just think about who you would truly want to be. That's the biggest regret that people have, is that they didn't have the courage to be who they wanted to be. The next step, honestly, is to begin telling people about it. Like when I started telling people, and I'd been telling people about it for a few years, that I wanted to write books, but I really started telling people more and more, like, I'm going to be going for this. Like, I'm going to really start blogging and just actually going for it. And it's really important to start telling people about your goals. If you hold those things in, if you're too afraid to tell people about your goals, you're so less likely to achieve them. There's like several reasons for that, but your identity. So there's a theory called identity narrative, or narrative identity theory, but basically it's the idea that your identity is based on the stories you tell. And when you begin telling people about who you want to be or your goals, and you don't have to say you're that person yet, you can say that's who I want to be, because your future self is actually not you yet. You're not that person yet, but this is who you want to be. And this is what you're going to go for. Not only do you get a lot of encouragement and support, but also you then feel compelled to begin kind of being consistent with your words. And it's fun too when you tell people about what you're planning on doing, and then you start doing it. Like I remember when I started throwing out horrible blog posts, my first ones, and I wasn't sure what I was going to write about. I was kind of just writing about topics that I liked, that I was reading about. But people can then see what you're up to, and people are really inspired when they're watching someone in real time attempting their goals or attempting their dreams, rather than just being who they were yesterday rather than not having ambitions. It's really powerful to watch someone try and even fail sloppily along the way. And then all of a sudden a year, 2 years goes by, because time goes fast for people. They're not paying attention to you as much as you're paying attention to yourself. They may see a blog post here or there, a post here or there, but then a year or two goes by and all of a sudden it's like, whoa, Ben's coming out with a book. It's like, how'd that happen? So like they can watch this stuff happen and it feels a lot faster to them because they're not paying it, again, as much attention, but they watched you kind of do it and they watched you evolve and they're like, whoa, I remember when you were telling me about this. Now you've got this book and it's pretty good. Like, how'd that happen? And so it's fun it's empowering to tell people about where you're going and then for them to see it happen.
Yeah, for sure. When you're telling that story, I'm just thinking about the podcast for me, because it's like I never posted online. Like before I started my podcast, I put my last post on Facebook was 7 months prior, and I had one comment from a friend saying, "Dang, this guy's still on Facebook." So I went from like never being online to like starting a podcast. So a lot of people in my network got to see my journey so far.
I love it. It's cool, man. And now here you are doing lives and stuff, man, being all courageous. Maybe it's not courageous anymore. Maybe it's just, you're just doing it now. But I mean, talk about awesome.
Yeah. Thanks, man. So let's talk about, why did you want to be an author? Like, why was it so important for you to have a book published in one of the top 5 publishers, just like, getting your words out there? Like, why was that destination so important to you?
Well, when I was on that mission experience back when I was like 20 years old, I read some great books that just totally opened up my thinking. And I really just fell in love with learning. I just fell in love with learning, reading, and I changed a lot, changed my identity, changed my behavior, changed my motivation. I just started like loving learning and growing, and I started to become really changed. I changed a lot. I think you can't learn without changing, and you can become a lot more powerful, a lot more creative, confident, and just you're less limited. And so I was just feeling a lot of growth and excitement, and just thought, if people are, I would just remember reading books, and every time I would read a book, I'd go to the back and just read like the short bio in the back of the book about the person, and just thinking like, what the heck would lead someone to like being able to write something like this? Like I was just thinking in those terms after a while, after I'd read so many books, and my eyes were just really, my mind was expanding, and I was just loving the feeling. And so I then just was, I'd always start reading the bios and just think like, what if I became a person like that? Like, what if I started doing this for myself? Obviously, if there's all these other people who are doing it, then it's possible that I could do it myself. So then I just thought this would be something that I would love to do. I didn't know if I could do it as a career. I didn't even know what that looked like. I didn't know if people just write as a full-time career, if they do it as a hobby, or, I didn't know all those answers when I first started, but I just decided I'd like to do this in some form or fashion. And then obviously over time, I developed the knowledge and perspectives and the goals to just do it full time, and to do it in the way I want to do it, versus, and to take the inspiration of the role models that I'd had, but then to say, this is how I want to do it, or this is kind of the life I want to create.
So, you're immersed into reading lots of books, learning more about the authors that were writing those books, seeing that could be a reality for you. And then you wanted to write a book yourself. Was the reason for you writing the book yourself to get like your perspective out there, or was it more of the destination of the fact that you wrote a book, or
No, I think the main thing, I think that the main thing I initially wanted was just to provide the same experience that I had to other people. Like when I read
Okay.
books, I was shocked at how, initially, it happens less and less now, although I still read a ton of books. I could go through at least a book a week, but I remember when I really first started to read and learn, and I was starting to kind of expand, like I just was just loving all these different books. And I just thought it'd be pretty amazing if I could provide that same experience to some other person, like where like, I could provide some perspective that would just give them a totally new opportunity or a new possibility, because now they see things differently, or they see themselves differently. So that was my main motivation, and I think still is. I do get a lot of satisfaction out of, like, just as an example, creating something that I believe is good. Comparing my first book to my second book, like just reading through it and thinking like, this is a more valuable book. This is a better written book. I think this is a better delivery. I think there's more impact, or there's more potential impact in this book. I think that it does get fun to, as far as like become a craftsperson, and like the joy of the craft itself. But for me, it's still mostly about hopefully providing an experience for other people.
All right. That makes a lot of sense. So then, why is it so important to give that experience back? Like, if you received that from so many authors, you got to read all these books. There's a lot of other books out there. So like, why is it so important for you to be like, okay, let me give this experience to someone else?
You have to, at some point or another, decide a purpose for yourself. And so for me, I just felt like that's a good purpose for my life, at least in this chapter. It just gives me a lot of purpose, gives me a lot of sense, gives me something enjoyable and creative to do. So, um, I mean, that's kind of my answer. It's just that I just wanted to do it. Like
Yeah.
I'm not, it's not that profound, but yeah, there's a lot of books out there, and your question's actually true, because it does make me think, and I think a lot of people get to this point. It's like, okay, I've been doing this for a little while. Is my voice needed anymore in this space? And so, or should I go do something else? But even that question, you do come to realize that your voice is unique. Even if there's a lot of people saying similar things, your perspective is different. And I think that's when it becomes enjoyable, honestly, when you start blogging or writing, is when you don't try to be someone else. Honestly, you get to the point where you just feel totally, I mean, you can still use strategies, as far as like good headlines and stuff, but when you just get to the point where you own your own opinion, own your own perspective, and it's okay if it's not the perfect perspective, but and so, yeah, I don't know if that helps.
No, yeah, it's awesome. I sort of kept going deeper to see where it would end, and it sounds like your why for starting, was is aligned with who you are today. It's just you've just sort of taken the journey to get there. So like you knew you wanted to be an author, to write these books, to have the give back to people like how you received from other books. And in order to get there, you had to be blogging, building email list, and hit these milestones so you could get the goals that you want. But as far as the why goes, it sounds like it's very aligned from the beginning to where you are today.
Yeah, it's still aligned. I mean, there are different aspects of my why that evolve over time. Like a lot of it, could be that I take on a project because I really want to like grow as a writer. Like I recently wrote a book. So Personality comes out in June. Personality isn't permanent, but another book comes out in October. And that book, I did that book for other reasons. That book, which comes out in October, I did it for one because I really liked the person. So it was a co-authorship with a guy named Dan Sullivan. Not sure if you've heard of Dan Sullivan, but he's a founder of Strategic Coach. He and I co-authored this book. And a lot of why I wrote this book is because I really loved his ideas. And I do think that the ideas are going to be helpful for other people. But I also wanted to help Dan, so like it's really good to, collaborate with people who you are inspired by and who you want to help. And so I wanted to get his ideas out there in a different way. And I also just wanted to use it as an opportunity to become a better writer. So that one had a slightly different motive. But I think the big picture motive is still very much, I want to help people. I want to learn. I want to grow myself, but I also want to help other people do the same. So I think that that's definitely stayed the same.
Yeah, that's awesome. Jeff just tuned in. He said, "Good morning, Jeremy and Ben." Good morning,
Nice.
Jeff.
Morning, Jeff.
All right. So, um, like, what kind of barriers did you have to overcome? You talked about the stepping stones that you had to take to becoming this author in the path that you chose that you wanted to take. So, like, what were some of the barriers during your journey? Like, what was it like trying to build your email list? Things of that nature.
A lot of barriers. Obviously, learning where to write, how to write, getting negative feedback, getting zero feedback. Yeah, I mean, even just pitching my articles to like other other websites and just getting rejected. I mean, so there's all sorts of barriers that you have to go through. I mean, every goal you have. One of my favorite quotes actually is, it's from Robert Brault. He said, "We're kept from our goal not by obstacles, but by a clear path to a lesser goal." So every goal has obstacles. Like, you're not the person who has achieved your goal. You're the person who wants to achieve your goal. And so, yeah, I mean, I think most of my obstacles, I think the primary obstacles when it comes to sharing information or sharing content is your own self. It's your own fears. You're, doing anything and everything you can to get, to not go right. Like just basically distracting myself all day and not just sitting down and writing what I want to say. I think that's the big stuff. I mean, once you start getting to the point where you stop worrying about your own fears and you just start writing more, Then the obstacles become, how do you make your work better? How do you make it more useful to the reader? How do you make, and so those are other obstacles. But my primary ones then and continue to be just getting out of my own emotional way so that I can just say what I want to say or write what I want to, write. And then obviously you can get it better and better. So I think that it's always, I think that the primary one is the emotional stuff.
Yeah, I would agree with that. So you found like a powerful why. You're like, this is the destination I need to go. And is it true? Would you say that you felt like obligated to be like sharing at that point? Because it's like the only way for me to get to this goal is to, start blogging. And now you almost felt obligated to put your voice out there as opposed to like having to think more about the barriers that would be like stopping you from that.
I felt willing. I would say, I don't know if I felt obligated, but
Okay.
I felt willing. I felt like I was willing to do it. And I felt I obligated in the sense that it was what was required to achieve my goal. But then you do get to the point where you realize that it's actually a beautiful thing. sharing your words, even on blogs, you realize that it's actually a beautiful platform, and you become really grateful that technology exists. And so getting to your goal actually ends up becoming really powerful, because the only way you can get to your goal is by helping other people. And so you have, the only way to build an audience is by helping people. And so the only way to get to your goal is by doing your goal, which is what you want to be doing anyways, which is to support or help other people. And so, yeah, it goes from, I don't know if I've ever felt obligated to do it, but I've felt willing and then committed to doing it. And even now, like being on this interview with you, I don't feel obligated to do this. I want to do it. I don't know if there's ever an obligation. It's more of, this is what I want to be doing, but it's also, I know where my future self is. And so I'm willing to do what I must in order to hopefully produce the result that I want to produce, and obviously to help other people.
Is this the first time you're doing a live stream?
Maybe. I don't know. I do a ton of podcasts right now because I'm wanting to sell a bunch of these books, but this might be the first live stream and I'm loving it, dude. Happy to be here with you. This is freaking awesome. I love this, actually.
Jeff said, great advice and very true. So he's agreeing with what you're saying. So you've had some great success on building your email list. Do you mind just talking a little bit about the process that you used to accomplish that?
Happy to. Yeah. So the initial goal was to get 100,000 email subscribers, because that was kind of the target that I was told would be required to get the book deal I wanted. So I really was working. I was probably from 2015 to 2018. I was right. I'll say from 2015, 16, and 17. Actually, really just 2015 and 16. Because I got my book deal in January of 2017. So I wrote for a year and a half before I got to that goal, which was 100,000 email subscribers. But wow. I probably wrote well over 100 articles during that year and a half. But one of the things that I did was I was focused on quantity. I was focused on quality more than quantity. I did do a bunch of quantity, but a lot of my articles were like 3,000 words or more. Some of them were like 5,000, some of them 10,000 words. Like one of the things that I learned is just that quality does often go farther. Quantity is important as well, but quality can really move the needle. It's worth trying to do something really well, but not to be a perfectionist. Like you still have to just pump stuff out. So there's a happy medium. But I was told, I read like from John Morrow and even Tim Ferriss, like way back then, that their best articles or their most viral ones were all over 3,000 words. And so I would just take that stuff and just implement it. One of the things that happened, so when my first article went very viral, which was, in the summer of 2015, it got millions and millions of views, but I never got any email subscribers. Like I was looking at my email subscriber account and there was nothing happening. And I was wondering why, because on my website, this was on Medium, by the way, the article was on Medium, but on my website, there was a place where people could put their email in and get a free ebook. Because I was also told and studied that you kind of need to give people something for free in order to incentivize them to essentially give you their email. And I was not getting any emails, and I was wondering why, because I'm like, this article is getting millions of views. Why aren't people going to my website and seeing that they can get a free ebook? So that led me to the insight that I needed to put a call to action at the bottom of the article. So I edited the article and gave a link, and I said, hey, if you like this article, click this link and you can go to my website and you can get my free ebook. And just by doing that, but it was at the end of the traffic, the traffic was kind of on its way down. Basically, like within a day, I went from 0 to about 3,000 emails.
Wow.
If that call to action was there at the beginning, I would have definitely had like 50,000 or 100,000 emails. You can, but yeah, I would have had over 50,000 emails, if that was there at the beginning. But what happened was that taught me something. And so then my process refined. I read the book by Russell Brunson, which was called .com Secrets, which is a great book. I read that book in the summer of 2016. And so from 2015 to 2016, for a whole year, I was sending people to my website and just asking them to get my free ebook. And by doing that, I was averaging about 2,000 to 5,000 emails, probably 2,000 emails a month. So by that point, I had like 20,000 emails or something like that. By the summer of 2015, maybe 25,000 emails. I mean, I'd been doing it for a year.
Wow.
And was writing a lot, pumping out a lot, and getting better and better at creating virality. But then when I read Brunson's book, he taught me about the idea of the landing page, a squeeze page or whatever, where you don't send people to your email list, you send people to a page that's just built specifically for getting an email address. There's no other options. The problem with the problem with websites is that there's too many options. You can read the about, you can read other articles, you can contact, if you send people to a website, you're not going to get what's called a high conversion rate because you've given them too many options and they're going to get lost. It's kind of like being in a casino. Like you just get lost in too many different options. In psychology, we call it decision fatigue. You don't want to give people more than one option. And so that's why I like landing pages, because there's just one option. You send people to a page and you say, hey, if you want this free thing, put in your email, and people can either give you. And so those pages usually have like at least a 40% conversion rate. So I switched over and I was giving people away my ebook on a landing page, and I went from getting about 2,000 emails a month to getting immediately 5,000 emails a month. So I more than doubled just by switching the platform or the page. And then the next big shift, which was around that point, I think it was in probably the fall of 2016, was I switched giving away an ebook, because ebooks can kind of feel like a big commitment. And I gave away a short, like 5 to 7 page checklist that just provided strategies for having a good morning routine. And when I started giving away that checklist, I went from literally the same amount of blog traffic. I went from 5,000 emails a month to 20,000 emails a month immediately, just by switching the giveaway. So I was sending people to a landing page, not to my website, and I switched my giveaway to a really easy, very relevant, very results-based checklist or easy giveaway. And so then I started getting 20,000 emails a month from there forward for about the next 2.5 years. And quickly, by the time January of 2017 came around, I hit 100,000 emails. I got a help with writing my book proposal from Ryan Holiday, and he helped me get an agent. And then we sold the book, which ended up becoming Willpower Doesn't Work. Wow. And then it came out in 2018, came out a year later.
Yeah, that's an amazing journey. And it's crazy to think that, sometimes you get that early success, but you have to learn from it. But if you had that, say a landing page with the follow-up.
If I had that in the beginning, my email list would be like 1 million people by now.
Yeah, that's crazy.
That's okay.
Yeah,
one thing I will say about all of this is, though, it's that whole idea that you miss every shot you don't take. There's hundreds or thousands of articles that I never did write. Ideas that popped in my head that I just never got around to writing. I was lazy or too busy or just didn't wake up early enough, or just decided to just let the idea slip. And so although I've taken a lot of shots and learned how to take better shots, there's tons of, I would be in a different place if I had taken more shots. And that's okay, but I will say you're always surprised. I will say you can't predict which ones will work. I mean, even just this week, because I just got back into blogging, I've probably written 4 articles in the last week, and I'm gonna actually try to do 200 articles this year. But I wrote an article on Psychology Today, which is one of the places I write. Didn't expect it, but it got 100,000 views, like just bang, like fast. And
that's today?
No, I wrote it on Monday. I wrote the article on Monday, but since Monday, it's gotten 100,000 views, and like I've never gotten that many views on that platform. But I'm just glad I wrote that article. And I didn't expect that. The article took me an hour and a half to write, or 2, or maybe an hour to hour and a half, and It's not like the world's best article, but I would, you just never can predict what's going to happen on the internet.
Right.
A lot of the articles I just whipped out in like 30 minutes were some of my most viral ones. And then sometimes, and you just never know. So it's worth taking shots. And I think that that's actually how you build confidence, is you just keep taking shots, and you stop worrying so much about it being perfect. You stop worrying about the repercussions. You just start having more fun with it, and really stop worrying about other people's opinions.
That's pretty amazing. I mean, congratulations, just by the way, on the success of building the list, getting your book out, following your dreams and pursuing it and taking action, and getting to that destination that you set for yourself. That's amazing.
Well, I have a new future self now, man, and it's terrifying. Whenever you get to a certain place, then the vision expands, and the worst thing you can do is get stuck in a status. For a long time, I was the top writer on Medium.com, and it could be very easy for me to keep just being that guy. But what got you here won't get you there. And at a certain point, you got to let go of the status of your past, whether it's a failure or a success, and you've got to go back to the growth of your future self. And that's a humble place to be. That's the student place to be. And so, I have a future self now, and so I'm grateful for where I'm at, but I have a future self that I'm pursuing that's a lot more important than my past. And, fundamentally, yeah. I'm not there yet. I'm nowhere near that.
And you just started executing on that future self. Like, you've been in a cave for the past 2 years.
Well, writing the book is part of the future self, but now it's, it's executing. So like this book right here, Personality Isn't Permanent. I wrote this with my future self in mind. I wrote this book with the person I want to be, the type of writer I want to be, but also the type of situation I'm in as a writer and as a person, and with my income, and with what I'm wanting to focus on in the next chapter of my life. Which is maybe 2 or 3 years I think that defining a future self it's best if it's only like 2 or 3 years into the future. If it's too far out there, it's you can make huge change in 1 to 3 years. I mean, I would say closer to 2 to 3 would probably be more realistic, but you can make obscene change in 2 to 3 years if you're being intentional, if you're being courageous, if you're not worried, if you're telling people about your goals, if you're clarifying it. And then if you're obviously refining the process and getting better and just committing to who you want to be, you can make some pretty amazing progress in a few years.
Yeah. And I mean, just from the title of the book, it sounds like it's very aligned with a lot of things you've been talking about today, with just the fact that you're never the same person when you're looking back or the future. You're always a different person through time. Do you mind, you want to just give a quick spiel about your book real quick and tell us a little bit about it?
Sure, I'll just give a little brief. So this book really explains kind of a lot of the new ideas on personality, but also a lot of ideas that are not so new. But let me just kind of explain the general view of personality, which is non-scientific, and it's not really helpful for people. So what most people, or a lot of people, think, kind of the pop culture view of personality, is that it's innate. It's just who you are. It's your authentic self. It's not very flexible or not very changeable. Maybe you can change little bits of it, but you kind of are who you are. And because it's who you are, you've got to discover that self. And this is why personality tests are popular, is because they can kind of reveal to you who you really are. Personality tests can give you some good information, but in general, you should take them very heavily with a grain of salt. Most type-based personality tests, although very popular, they're not good science. They're not valid or reliable tests. But also, one of the big problems with overly taking a test and taking a label or a category is that it becomes a big aspect of your identity. And when you have like a label, whether it's something from a personality test, or even if you just call yourself an introvert, or etc., then what you end up doing is you become very, first off, you try to defend the label, rather than dethrone the label. Rather than becoming someone different, you actually really try to just say, this is who I am. And you set goals to confirm the label. And one of the things that actually happens, so in psychology, we all have tunnel vision, every one of us. There's a quote that says, we don't see the world as it is, we see the world as we are. So in psychology, we call it selective attention. But I don't know if you've had the experience, but if you buy a car, or if if you have a car, you can kind of see other people who are driving the same car on the road. I don't know if you've ever had that experience. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So like recently I got a Mini Cooper. And so like now I see Mini Coopers all over the place, but I didn't see Mini Coopers all over the place before I got one, you know? So like we focus on things that matter to us. Like if you hear your name in a crowd, you'll notice it. But you don't notice all the other noise, and you don't notice all the other cars. And that's really what happens with labels, is that when you have a label, that's all you notice. So if you think you're depressed, you'll think you're always depressed, but the truth is you're not. And so they create tunnel vision. And anyways, the main point, aside from the fact that you defend the label and try to confirm it rather than try to become who you really want to be, is that it limits your flexibility and ability to change and grow. Rather than owning your current identity, it's better to realize that your future self is going to be someone different. And it's better to define your future self based on who you really want to become. And so it's better, actually, where most people, and kind of where the common myths are, is the common myth is that your goals should be based on your personality. The goals you set and the life you build should be based on your core personality. A much more empowering perspective, but also a more truthful perspective, is that actually your personality should be based on your goals. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. Yeah.
Who you become should be based on the goals that you have. And you can alter yourself. And this isn't to say you're being inauthentic. It's to say that you're evolving to be who you want to be. So like Adam Grant, he's a very famous psychologist. But he talked about how when he was a graduate student, he hated giving public speeches. Like he said it was not his authentic self. But ultimately he went against his authentic self and he became who he wanted to be. His authentic self was someone who hated giving speeches and he was terrible at it. But he went against his authentic self to become who he wanted to be. And I think that that's one of the big problems, I think, is that people are trying to be so authentic to who they currently are that it stunts their growth for who they could become. And so this book just kind of really breaks down kind of the real science. One of the big things that shapes personality is trauma, just negative experiences from the past that limit your view of yourself. Other things that shape your personality are your environment, your friends. There's just so many things that shape who you are, and you have a great deal of control over those things. You can reframe traumas, negative memories, negative events, and they don't have to impact you the same way. You can see yourself differently. So yeah, this book just really breaks down and explains how all that works. There's a lot of research in this book about the future self, obviously, and about how to shape that future self, and about how ultimately you can use that to drive your behavior and become who you want to be, which is not an easy path, but it's a very doable path. And as you build more confidence and flexibility as a person, you'll set bigger and bigger future self leaps. And then you'll go through the courageous process of becoming that. And that's a lot more fun, to live your life based on who you want to be rather than living your life in a repetitive mode where you're being the same person you were yesterday.
Yeah. And I could see that after you go through a few iterations of, setting a goal for your future self, you could lower the barrier of defining that future self by limited beliefs that you have as the current self that you are today. So like, the act of doing that. And obviously I'm sure your book helps work people through that. So that sounds awesome. I definitely will want to check that book out.
Yeah, man. Hopefully you read it and hopefully you enjoy it.
Yeah, for sure. So let's talk a little bit about, not spend too much time, but what's some of your goals looking forward? Because, you said that, Medium's not necessarily what it was back in the day. Now you've built this email list. Like, where are you putting your focus? Like, where do you see the future self that you defined, like sort of some of the stepping stones that you're going to be taking to get there?
Yeah, so the future self that I have now is different from the future self that is now the person I am today. In 2015, the future self was essentially the person I am today to some degrees. But yeah, my future self, I'm actually going to be making a big pivot in 2 years from now, where I'm going to be shifting back. So when I was serving as a missionary, and it was just such a great experience, such a transformational experience for me, I got a lot of meaning out of that and a lot of depth. And I actually want to go back to doing that type of work, maybe more in a leadership role in this case now, and dedicating more of my time to that kind of stuff. But I want to do it in a really powerful way. And so in order to do that, I obviously need to be in a position, both financially, but also in other ways, various leadership characteristics. And, I've spent a lot of time. I spent my PhD studying leadership and things like that. So I've developed a lot in the last 10 years since I've been home from that experience. But in order for my future self, the person I want to be in and the situation I want to be in 2 or 3 years to be real, I pretty much need to be able to essentially retire, to be fully honest with you. And like, I'm only 32 years old. So like the goal to get there now is actually, to be honest with you, to sell 10 million copies of this book. Like in the next 2 or 3 years, I want to figure out how to sell millions and millions of copies of this book to put myself not only in a financial situation, because I'll keep writing, my future self will keep writing books like this, but I'm going to be stepping away from a lot of the entrepreneurial things I'm doing, a lot of the collaborations I'm doing. I'm going to be focusing a lot more on some of the more spiritual things that are very interesting and important to myself and to my future self. And so, yeah, so that vision and then the goal shapes my process. I mean, if I'm going to really sell 10 million books, I've got to figure out how to do that. And so what that looks like in 2020, to be fully honest with you, is doing over 600 podcasts, writing 200 blog posts, getting the book seen on hopefully TV shows, like, just pitching this thing, spreading this thing like crazy, and so, getting help from people that I don't even know. And so, yeah, when you're really, one of the things I like, one of the quotes that I love is, when the why is strong enough, you figure out the how, or when the why is strong enough, you'll do anyhow. And so this year is a crazy year, obviously with 5 kids, I wake up at like 5 a.m. and I don't work after 3 p.m., especially with COVID-19, my kids are all sitting at home, although they play tennis and stuff. But, so it's not like I'm doing this all day. I have people who help me, I'm not the one scheduling all these podcasts, although I'm the one getting on and doing them. And I'm the person waking up at 5 a.m. writing the articles, but the goal shapes the process. And I'm super committed to that future self, and I'm excited. And so I'm going to figure out how to sell millions of copies of this book to put myself and my family in a financial situation, and also myself in a situation as an author where I can make that big pivot and make my next future self a reality.
Yeah.
And again, like growing the email list, I have no clue how to sell millions of books. Current Benjamin Hardy, the one talking to you right now, is not my future self yet. And so I have no clue how I'm going to achieve this goal.
Right. Well, I mean, I think it's an awesome goal, and it's very, fulfilling sounding. I think it's all achievable from like the stepping stones part that you said. I just had a guest on the other day that has been a guest on 1,800 episodes of other podcasts. He's got a full-time person who literally just like tries to get him onto podcasts. So it's just an interesting way to get yourself out there. And, getting on 600, I think is doable, especially with how many podcasts out there, like just, looking for good quality guests to have on.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. It'll, and obviously I got a blog, and, you have to have a lot of good breaks. It's not, but, when the why is strong enough, you figure out the how, and I like the quote, the bigger the future, the better the present, because the vision of the future really determines how you show up in the present. So for me, it's not about just doing 600 podcasts, because I assume that, it's, maybe you've heard of the 10,000 hour rule by Malcolm Gladwell. Have you heard of that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What's funny is that that's based on research, and basically the idea is that you could do something for 10,000 hours and not get any better. You could go on 10,000 podcasts and not achieve a goal, and so right. Like, you have to make sure it's not 10,000 hours. It's actually a concept called deliberate practice. And it's the idea that you have to be really clear on your future self, and the things that you do must be the right steps to get there, so you got to adjust the process if it's not moving you in that direction.
Yeah, for sure. That's awesome. Thanks for sharing that. And now you're putting the word out there. So, our community is going to hold you to it. And, hopefully maybe if anybody's,
you guys better hold me to it. I'll see you in 2 years, guys. I'll see you in 2 years.
Yeah. And if you're listening and you know someone that might be able to help Ben reach his goals, please feel free to connect with him on Instagram or on LinkedIn and just send him a message. Love to, send people your way, Ben.
Thanks, Jeremy. It's been fun, man.
So as far as advice for like a new influencer, for you, you've had a lot of success in the book realm. Now you're like sort of getting into the promotion. You've done a lot of blog posts. What would be some of the biggest advice you'd give to someone that's either hasn't started or has just recently started out in today's world?
Clarify your future self first. Without that, you don't have the most direction, but it doesn't have to be the most in-depth. Again, like a year or 2 or 3, maybe in the future, of just what does that look like? And then begin to get education and mentorship, and then begin just failing fast, like begin putting out, whether it be bad blog posts or bad vlogs or bad, whatever it is, whatever your quote form of influence is, start doing it fast and getting education on it. Like, I wouldn't have been able to achieve my goals if I wasn't reading books or taking online courses that taught me how to write viral articles. And so it's not just enough to just do it, because there's a lot of people I know who were writing on Medium back when I was writing on it, and they're still just writing there, and they've written thousands of blog posts, but they're just still kind of in that same mentality where they're never going to actually get anywhere. And so you got to really, that's why I think determining a future self is so crucial. How do you really want to do this? And then once you've done that, you've got to commit to that process of figuring out how to do it and doing it successfully. But you get successful by by doing a lot of it and by failing, by putting out a lot of stuff and getting to the point where you're okay just putting stuff out that's imperfect, but getting better and better at doing it and more consistent at doing it. So that'd be my advice. And just
All
get
right.
past the emotions. Just wake up and do it. Like I love the quote, eat the frog, do the worst first. Just do it. I mean, you may not do it in the morning, but I think it's great. It's been better for me to publish something before 8 a.m. because then you don't have to think about it all day. It's just done. And you have a good day for the rest of your day when you know you've done that one thing.
Right. Yeah, great advice. Yeah, it's very aligned with a lot of advice that we've been, going through on the episode. Um, so if you were to meet someone who's more established, maybe another author, someone who's already established as an influencer in their space, what would be some secret sauce that you would be willing to share to like help that person maybe level up what they're doing? Something that you're doing different than the average person, in your opinion.
I think one thing that I would recommend to anyone, even people who are further in the game than I am, because one thing that's really interesting is that some of my favorite, maybe you've had this experience where maybe you've had like a musician you liked and you liked their early work, but over time their work became a little bit more bland or more stale. I don't know if you've had that experience. So like I've had that experience, like where like I'll listen to a musician and like I love their first stuff, but like as they advance and have like more and more albums, their albums just become more mainstream or less interesting to me.
Yeah.
That's kind of inevitable, but I've had a lot of my favorite authors that have gone through the same phases where like their first books were like so good, but like as they wrote more, they became more and more trendy or less powerful or less making a stand, less risky. And I've noticed that with a lot of my favorite writers is that their work became less interesting over time. And what my invitation would be for people is to continue to be innovative, to continue to, when you actually do something, to be thoughtful about it and to kind of be, to do something unique, to say something different. To actually come up with something different, unique, useful, some different angle, like I really like Ryan Holiday's first breakout book, which was The Obstacle is the Way. Like that was a really unique book. I like a lot of his other stuff too, but I think his new stuff is a little less unique. And so he's not the only one. Like I actually think he's a freaking really good writer. But I want to push my own thinking. I want my next book to be, I think that every writer feels this way. I mean, even Ryan, but you want your next book to be maybe even more risky than your last one, where you're saying, and more honest or more thoughtful or more innovative, more clever. And so don't get lazy, when your work actually starts doing well. Like keep pushing your own boundaries, in other words. Because it can be easy to ride the waves of your former success for a while, but eventually I don't think you can.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. I see that, all over the place, not just in, the author space, but just people like creating YouTube videos or creating podcasts. Like they start out, doing something.
Their first stuff is freaking cool, right?
Yeah. And then they sort of like either settle or maybe like go through like a downspout, and then maybe they'll make a jump and then get back up and then slide down, make another jump.
And that's kind of inevitable because I mean, you do go through phases of creativity, but I think, if you lose that creative feel, one of the things I like, and this is something that Dan Sullivan's taught me, is always make your growth greater than your status. Like once you achieve a status, like, once you become a famous vlogger, once you get a book deal, you can obsess on that status and then you stop wanting to grow. And then the status is just all about maintaining the status. So I got 100,000, followers. And if it's all about status, then you're going to stop growing. And so if you let go of the status and you just don't care about the status, I don't care if I'm an author anymore. What I care about is keep growing. Then you're gonna keep, learning and keep doing interesting things. But if you're just caught in your own status, then your work's gonna lose its power.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. All right, well, first of all, I just want to say thanks again for coming on today. Before I open the floor for you to tell people the best way to connect with you, do we have a minute left? Or I just want to see if
I got to go in like 2 or 3 minutes, but yeah.
I just want to see if you have any last words for the listeners, people that maybe have barriers in their way to sharing or going bigger than they should be sharing. Do you have any just last words of wisdom?
Hmm. I mean, I think I've shared a ton. I don't know if I had
All right.
any. I mean, I'm sure there's other words of wisdom. I mean, there's quotes obviously that I love. Better prolific than perfect, stuff like that. But I think at the end of the day, it's just define your future self and just courageously commit to being that person and tell everyone about it and be okay not being that person today. And I mean, kind of just what I'm saying. I think that's some big stuff. I mean, in the book, I talk a lot about reframing trauma. Obviously, if you've got negative experiences or even limiting beliefs, where does that stuff come from? It comes from negative events from your past. And sometimes you got to reframe those and go back and reshape your memories. And, I talk a lot about that, but that's a thick process. I would just
Okay.
invite people to start journaling, honestly, start journaling about their goals and then start making progress daily towards them.
Awesome. So what's the best way for people to connect with you? Where do you prefer they go? I'm going to put links on the show notes for this episode, and even on the live stream, I put a link to your
I'd say
link
Benjamin
tree.
Hardy is the best place. BenjaminHardy.com is just where you can email me. You can get my blog posts. You can get access to free courses. We're giving my website's currently under construction. Not everything I've done is live, so this is freaking cool that it's live. Within a week, my website will be a little different so that anyone who buys this book will be able to get access to 3 free courses. One is a personality isn't permanent course, one's a journaling course, and then one is a blogging course. I've sold the blogging course, for over $1,000 to many people, but we're giving away all these things for people who buy the book. And so go back to benjaminhardy.com at some point in the next week or so. And if you pre-order the book or whatever, we'll give you all these courses for free.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll put links to all that.
Benny boy.
All right, Benny boy. Yeah, we're getting some funny comments.
You can call myself Benny boy. What's up? What's up, Benny boy?
All right. Well, thanks so much for taking the time to come on here and share with us today. It's a ton of value that you shared, and I really appreciate the time that you spent with us. It means a lot to me, and it means a lot to the community. So thank you.
Dude, you're awesome, Jeremy. It's a total pleasure. And for anyone who listens, I hope that this serves you well and that you go for the future self.
Awesome. All right. Well, I'll let you go. I know you're out of time. So thanks again, and we'll be in touch.
Have a great day, everyone. See you guys.
All right. Well, thanks for taking the time to tune in today. I look forward to seeing you in the next one. And thanks, guys, for engaging in the comments. Is pretty cool to see those comments come in.